Welcome to Digitally Creative. I'm your host, Vincent Ferrari, and joining me this week is someone whose work I guarantee you've seen, but whose face you may not have seen. This week, I have the pleasure of talking to the one and only Mark Adams. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Just a little bit of recovery from the camp. So
From the festivities. I was telling people, I think I actually told you too that you were like one of my bucket list things for Maker Camp. Like I had a couple of things I wanted to do and people I wanted to meet, and I was like, well, if I'm going to be at Maker Camp, like I have to get one of the signature portraits of Maker Camp, and apparently a lot of people get the signature portrait from Maker Camp because your
yeah,
line was consistently the longest line of any of the lines for anything there was a line for the entire weekend. It's incredible.
it's changed quite. I mean, it's kind of it's. I'm very thankful, and it's a blessing. It's changed a little bit from the first Maker Camp when I was pulling people off they were walking by, and I'd kind of pull them in and like, hey, you want your picture? And they kind of give me this weird look. I know.
You had to
Well,
actually ask them.
well, yeah, because the first year, I think like one of the first people I grabbed was Joshua Prince, and he was walking by, and if you if you've met Joshua, he's seems a little quiet, but he's just such a amazing, fabulous maker, and so I reached out and I was like, hey, come on in, get your picture taken, and I kind of get this blank look, like, what do you mean, get your picture taken? Like, because it hadn't really built up any momentum at that point. I'd shot a couple of events, but and people had seen them, but didn't really. It wasn't really publicized what I was doing,
Hmm.
uh, and I didn't really have a sign, and so. People were they didn't really know what was going on. So I was kind of, running out into the field and grabbing some people. And then, by the end of the night, people will kind of come in, but, um, unless unless I grabbed you the first year or two, it was kind of a little. It was a very short line the first year for sure.
And so this year I did notice that I think everyone that went at some point got on your line and got a picture taken. And I think we were saying beforehand that, like, it comes around this time of the year, it's just everyone has a Mark Adams picture as their profile picture for at least a few months
Right. At least
while we wait for
I feel
things to
like I want to every time when I pull up Instagram, if I get all the stories on the top, then it's kind of like winning a slot machine.
Has it is it surprising to you that people appreciate? I mean, I'm not this going to come out weird, of course, but does it surprise you that people love your stuff this much? Because I do, when people start, when you become a destination at an event like this, right? You
Yeah.
expect to be there, you expect to be doing a thing, and you expect to have a good time. People are going to come and get their picture taken, but people genuinely love your work. Does it surprise you just how much of a fixture you're becoming at these events now?
It definitely it's definitely unexpected for sure. I mean, I really love being able to meet anybody who comes to get a portrait. It gives me a chance to meet him and have a conversation with him, and I try, as you experienced, I try to give
Hmm.
everybody the same amount of attention and time and get a picture that they really want. So
Yeah,
um,
I loved watching you work with people because there were a couple things that I noticed as you were going through your process with everybody. First of all, you don't rush anyone. Like, some people were just up there longer and you work with them and you want to get their best angle. Like, even with me, the way you kind of positioned me just in the right way, you didn't just go, okay, this is the picture. You're like, no, you have glasses on. So let's put you over here. Let's move you over here. We'll move the light a little bit so that, like, you really, I don't know, man. I've never had my picture professionally taken.
and most
So,
people who've gone to these events have not had that happen since they were in like high school senior
yeah,
portraits.
yeah, yeah, and
Um,
it was wild to have that level of attention paid and know that, you don't charge for this. You're doing this because you love it and you appreciate it, and you're at the event and you're doing the thing that you do at the event, and it was an amazing feeling just having it happen to me and watching you work with other people and seeing the captures you got. Like, I saw some of the pictures taken, I'm like, that's going to be a great picture, and then I see it on Instagram, I'm like, yep, that was a great picture. Like,
yeah,
you get people to loosen up so quickly. It's amazing to watch.
I mean, it really, it's a, I keep saying the word blessing, but it really is, like the greatest gift that I'm able to give is also the one that I also get back because I get to see, that moment when somebody sees kind of their first professional picture that they've seen as an adult, and if
Mhm.
they really respond to it and it feels natural and it feels like them and they're proud of it, then I mean, it's just so it makes my heart just like stop for a minute. Well, each person kind of really appreciates being seen, and that's kind of what my driving factor is, just to hope everybody's as proud of how they look and how they come across. So
It's an amazing feeling. Like, you feel like for a little while, just a little while, in that portion of the day, you feel like a celebrity. It's great. It's
thank
great.
you.
Do you so how did you I imagine it's probably a long journey. So, how did you get started with photography? When did it start for you, and how did it evolve? We'll go there first. Like, how did because everyone that's into photography in one way or another, whether personally, professionally, they all have a story of how they fell in love with it. So, how did you fall in love with photography, and where did it begin for you?
I mean, I think as a kid, I was always, my brother and I were all, we enjoyed art. Our parents, really allowed us to play as kids with, paper and pens and um, clay and whatever we wanted to make. And then my brother actually took a photography class. I have a twin brother, Kevin. So not a lot of people know that, but yes, I'm a twin. Um,
Wow.
and so he actually took a photography class in junior high school, and I ended up waiting until my freshman year of high school to take photography, and it kind of uh, it just clicked. Something about it really appealed to me, and I really enjoyed both the technical aspect of it and just kind of the what it allowed you to kind of document. Because I really started liking photojournalism. That was really one of the things that I looked at quite a bit, in high school, and you kind of look at fashion, but it doesn't really. I mean, it's really pretty and it's beautiful, but it doesn't. It wasn't driving me to create that kind of stuff, but I
Mhm.
love the technical aspect of that. Um, and then I went to uh, I went to a couple of different schools. I went to college for international studies in Japanese and went overseas. I lived in Japan for a year, and then I
Oh,
came
wow.
back and um, then I had to work for 3 years. I was working for 3 years for 2 jobs a day, just crazy crazy hours, just to save up money because I wanted to go to this school in Pasadena called Art Center College of Design.
Mhm.
And then they started out as a trade school, and they're very well respected in quite a few different fields of industrial design, product design, character design for the entertainment industry, graphic design, and photography. And so I went down to Pasadena, and I studied there till my money ran out, and then I just started working. So
And where did you end up working after that? Did you go into something photo something
yeah, yeah,
photography related, or
yeah. And I started assisting for various
okay.
different photographers just around LA, and I kind of started doing a bunch of product stuff. So most of my professional career has really been product or architecture, some advertising, but really just that was kind of unexpected because I always responded originally to portraiture and to people, but I just kept getting hired for product stuff, um, and then did that for I don't know, I mean 15, 16, 17 years, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then in 2000, I always get the dates always confused, but I think it was 2017.
Uh-huh.
Um, I decided I wanted to leave California and hopped on a motorcycle and rode it for 4 or 5 months, camped across America, and found Cleveland. So
That's kinda wild. So, did you just I imagine if that was me and I was taking a motorcycle cross country, there would be a lot of scenery shooting on the way and
right.
stopping and noticing, and, like you said, it took you 4 to 5 did you say
Yeah,
4 to 5?
yeah, 4 to 5 months. I was just kind of
Okay.
I'd originally planned in my brain, because I had to have a destination to get to um, to do the journey, and
Mhm.
it kind of started with meeting a couple of people riding motorcycles out in the middle of Oregon, and they were riding this thing called the Transamerica Trail. The TAT is how it's called, and they were telling me about how it starts, kind of at the Atlantic and goes to the Pacific, and it's mostly off road. There's some like transitory roads on the highway, but most of it's off road, forest roads, farm roads, back roads, um, and that really appealed to me. But I had to get from the West Coast to the East Coast because you generally ride it east to west because you have to get through the passes in Colorado after the snows have melted. So if you go
Right.
the other direction, you kind of get the early snow. So um, I decided to ride Route 66. Um, and so I was intending to do a certain amount of miles each day, but it just kind of, I wasn't getting out of it what I wanted to get out of it emotionally. Because
Hmm.
if you just do miles, you're just kind of passing by everything. And so
Sure. Sure.
I kind of changed my, like maybe a week into the trip, I kind of changed my mindset to just kind of each day I wanted to experience whatever I experienced, and I wanted to have moments that kind of solidified that place for me. And
Hmm.
until I had that moment, I would just kind of I'd be riding as many miles as I wanted to ride. It could be 10 miles, it could be 600 miles. But when I had that moment, I knew that I could leave that place, whether it was a great conversation with somebody or a great meal or, just visiting a great shop or, whatever made that day really feel like, I'd been present in that moment. So
Well, you
I
went from
really kind of
putting in.
reason the amount of miles you're going to do.
Yeah, you went from logging distance to logging experiences. So you
Yes.
ended up having you probably just had a wild string. I mean, I'm not wild like crazy drinking parties, although I imagine there were probably at least a couple of those too. But
Oh, God.
just
Well, I mean, I don't drink, so I can't have any drinking parties if I don't drink. So no, it was just me, and so it was really kind of being introspective and kind of trying to find what I wanted to find because I was also looking to leave California, and so I was kind of exploring America and what else it had to offer. So
and you're looking to see
um,
you're trying to find a place to fit in. You had a direction, but did you have a destination or just a direction?
well, because so like when I was originally gonna ride the Route 66, I went down to Santa Monica and then was riding Route 66 or like kind of off of it 20 miles or 30 miles or whatever road I felt like riding. And so
Hmm.
that would have put me finishing in Chicago. And then I wanted to ride up to like Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and Montreal, but I had to go through um, Cleveland because I wanted to change my clutch out before I got up there. And so I just, because I knew that my clutch was slipping a little bit and I didn't want to get in the middle of Canada and not, and have a slipping clutch. So I ordered some parts and I was having it shipped to a community motorcycle garage that's there called Skidmark Garage. And because they rent by either you can rent time by the hour or by the month or by the year, and so it's a membership community.
Hmm.
And so they've got workstations and tools, and everybody helps everybody. And but I couldn't get the parts for like 10 days because they were coming from Germany, and so then I just rode all around Ohio, just camping and just kind of exploring Ohio. And then I came back to Skidmark and hung out there for. I mean, I could have changed it out in a couple of days pretty easily, but I ended up spending a couple of weeks there just hanging out and going having dinner with people and just finding out that Cleveland was really such an amazing place. So
I think it's a very underrated place. It's one of the places that ends up the butt of a lot of jokes, but I just don't think it gets a fair shake. I learned a lot about Ohio this past year in general, and it's like, no, the people are just awesome in Ohio. Like in general, the people are awesome. Just the ones I met, and I didn't meet a whole ton, but it felt like a nice place. Like I could see where if I was looking for a place and I didn't have a place in mind, I'd be like, yeah, I could stay here. This is good. This is comfy.
well, because when I arrived there, Skidmark is in this building on Hamilton that
Hmm.
has they had I mean it was a big building and there were some businesses that had kind of started to fill it out. It was kind of a manufacturing building, but they were breaking it up into smaller spaces.
Hmm.
And so there was Skidmark, which is the community motorcycle garage on the first floor. And then on the second floor, there was Soulcraft Woodshop that was a community woodshop space. So
Hmm.
they would teach, classes and workshops, and they would bring in like high school student classes to teach woodchops. And so they were on the second floor, and then down the building a little bit was RBX Cleveland, which does architectural salvage. And
Okay.
so everybody there kind of had a really community involved relationship of wanting to give back, and then also create a sense of family in the spaces. And when you meet a whole building that's like that, it just feels easy to get to have wonderful experiences meeting a ton of people.
So you're there with the mindset of I got to get my bike fixed and then I'm going to figure it out from there. When do you make the decision that, yeah, this is my place. I think I'm just going to stay here. Like how long does it take and what was that
Um,
transition like?
well, I left after I finished my clutch, and I was riding up a road through Toronto and Montreal, and there's a they had told me when I was there that I should stay, but I kept thinking I had to leave. And there's this Fuel Cleveland, which is a custom built invitation motorcycle show with like 100 to 200 motorcycles. Each
Hmm.
year it gets bigger and bigger. And Mikey from Lobau, he's the organizing factor that and does an amazing job. And but I had never seen it, and so I didn't know how big it was. And I was up in Montreal, and I kept thinking of this great group of people that I really had a great time with, and they said that I should see it. And so, like an idiot, I turned my bike around and I rode back down through Vermont and Pennsylvania and New York to get back to Cleveland for this show. And so I come pulling in on the morning of the show with my bike, and my bike is packed to travel cross country, so there's way too much stuff on it. And so I just come riding in, and they're just like, "Oh, you're back!" And I was like, kind of at that moment, then I kind of stayed there, and then I would fly back to California for work, and I just like because I kept wanting to finish my trip, and I
Hmm.
just realized like I should just move my stuff out here because this is where I want to be. So
Wow. And there you've been.
yeah,
That's amazing. It's kind of like I think that's kind of how you find home, right? When you feel like you're returning someplace rather than visiting it. Like that's kind
right.
of it's kind of poetic almost. I love it. So you settle down in Cleveland
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
I imagine you have to start looking for photography work. Now, luckily Cleveland does have, an arts community that's actually pretty good.
Right.
How
Yeah.
was how was finding work there, and where did you end up there after you decided you were going to
Well,
stay?
well, because I'm kind of since I'm the new guy in town, which is actually one of the reasons why I've kind of developed the way I have. Because I knew that I really didn't want to do product, but that's all I had done. So I've got plenty of work that I can show that says I can do product. But I really wanted to do more portraiture.
Hmm.
And just since I had the skill set, I would just kind of set up Seamless to do portraits of the Skidmark members in Skidmark. If they would have a party or something, I'd be like, oh, this is something nice to do, and it'll give me some portraiture to show people. And um, so I would just have something set up, and people would come in and they'd be walking by, and I just grab them and say, hey, and then I'd email the pictures. Same thing I do now. Um, and one of the events, because I was renting space, there's a space upstairs in the building that has an architecture office called AO, and so I rent desk space out of there. And they were having a big. I'm trying to remember what the name of the thing it is, but they have various different speakers like once a month around Cleveland.
Hmm.
And so there were going to be like 150 people were going to show up and listen to the speaker and have this event. So I was like, hey, why don't I just set up a portrait thing, and I'll set it up, and everybody that comes in will get a free portrait, and that way I can pass my name along, and they'll have my email and contact, and if they need headshots or any kind of portraiture, then at least I've introduced myself personally, and they know who I am.
Sure.
And so I did that, and that was in the back of Soulcraft, and the Soulcraft guys were just like, you just leave it up. We're not using that space right now, so leave it up as long as you want. And
Nice.
like a couple weeks later, Lincoln Electric had brought Jimmy and a bunch of other makers to Cleveland, and I hadn't heard of them at this point. I was just my set was there, and I was downstairs working on my motorcycle. And Lincoln has been a supporter of Skidmark, and they had brought the makers there to have kind of like a wrap dinner or something like that. And so they were bringing in food, and I see these people walking around that I don't know, and I'm like, well, you guys look kind of cool. You guys want a headshot or a portrait or something? And I think I can't remember who was the first one I asked, but I pulled them upstairs and took some shots, and then went back to working on my motorcycle. And a couple other makers come up, and they're like, "Hey, are you that guy who does the pictures? Can we get a couple of those?" And So like half an hour later, everyone's up there drinking beers, getting headshots and getting portraits, and everybody wanted to get a picture with Jimmy, and I'm like, who's this Jimmy guy? Because it was my world, and so after like the fifth or sixth person who gets that, I'm like, all right, so I'm emailing pictures. I'm like, let me see who this Jimmy is. So I Google him, and obviously he pops up, and so that was kind of my introduction to the maker community because. As you experience, I really do try to treat every single person who comes in front of my camera exactly the same. I don't care if you're famous, if you're rich, if you're poor. I absolutely don't care. As long as you're there, I want you to get the picture that you want to feel proud by. So I just did that picture, and then the next year Lincoln had me shoot portraits at their spring make, and then after that, probably I don't know 4 or 6 months, something like that, maybe 8 months. Patrick and Jimmy contacted me about coming up to this thing that they were putting together with Austin, but they didn't know if I wanted to come up and take some portraits. They enjoyed it, so they didn't know if that would be something I'd be interested in. So they said, it's upstate New York in October. Like, what's the worst it can be? It's going to be beautiful. So,
Right.
so that was just, I showed up, and Austin put me pretty close to where I'm at now. It's a little bit of a wind tunnel, but it really forced me to limit the amount of gear that I use, which really forced me to actually be more mindful and present and not, it really, that location has just, really given me so much by just making me not kind of be showy with the lighting and make it look too good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really to focus more on the emotional side and connecting with people. And that's really what I've really tried to do this last couple of years. So.
It's one of the things that's striking about your photography, as someone, and I'm not even trying to say I feel stupid saying I'm a photographer in the room with you, but I love photography. I've loved photography since I understood how to use a DSLR. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about your work is how defined your style is. Like if I took a photo and worked on it for days, I could maybe get the look that you get. And what people don't know that have not had their picture taken by you, I had my pictures from you, I'm pretty sure the same day you took them,
Yeah,
which is
if I
freaking
can, I
wild.
try to send them. And before you're walking away from the set, I have you type your email, and I try to send the select right there because I don't want to have to manage it later, and I want everybody to
Sure.
have it as soon as they can get it because then they can post it and they can show people, and it becomes a communal thing, and that's really been the best part is just kind of the community interaction with the posting of the pictures and making comments and telling saying how they love meeting somebody or how this person really inspired them, and it that's been the surprising part has been how much that's been part of the conversation.
Yeah, and the ability that you have to nail the moment and to get a picture that is pretty much perfect out of camera and then get it to the person who took it, and it's like I get to have that experience. Like I'm not waiting to have that experience. I get If my phone had service, I would have had it on the spot. I got it when I got to a rest stop on the way
Yeah, a
home.
lot of people will say because it is kind of a little bit of a dead zone in there, but
Yeah,
like
it's
I got
pretty
it
bad.
at midnight or I got it when I woke up in
Yep.
the morning. But I do try to see it as soon as possible. This year, since as you saw, I had more lines than I've had in the past. I got a little bit backed up, and so I was actually spending a couple of days after I got back from Maker Camp, going through all the files and checking everybody's emails that had been typed and sending them off. And then, a few people contacted me that I had missed a couple of pictures. So I encourage anybody who got a picture but feels like they didn't get all of them, contact
I
me on Instagram, and I'll do my best to review anything that you think I might have missed.
Something that's readily apparent when I was watching you interact with people is that I do know a lot of photographers, and I have seen a lot of photographers do sessions similar to what you're doing, even on a smaller scale, and they don't look as happy. And one thing I noticed is, you had a smile on your face most of the time.
Yeah.
You were very kind to everyone. You were very warm to everyone. I mean, even when you told me when I didn't know that there was a line and I was standing there, you're like, that was the greatest moment. I stand on the side, I'm like, okay, where do you're like, yeah, those guys over there are waiting, and I look and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no, it's fine. Just they're already waiting. I'm like, okay, sorry. And what you didn't see, by the way, is I got on the line right after I spoke to you, And then somebody walked by. I'm like, got to talk to him. Got to get online. So I got off the line, and I was
Right.
like, well, I don't want to be an ass and jump the line. So I got back on the line at the end. That's why when you came out, you're like, how are you still online? I'm like,
Right.
don't even worry about it.
I mean,
But
I feel like everybody, at least, and I think that event is so great because everybody's, a lot of times they're just hanging out and they're,
mhm.
telling stories and stuff. And it really is an opportunity, thankfully, for people to kind of take that time and just hang out together while they're waiting to get a picture. So it's
Mhm.
not like they're, you're not rushed to get somewhere else,
Sure.
especially in the evening, because it's like you'd be hanging out by the fire or be getting a picture or whatever. And so it feels like the energy is really relaxed and nobody kind of is, oh, you cut in front of me, or there's none of that energy. It just feels like everybody is there for the same reason.
So you do spring make, you do maker camp, the first year of maker camp.
Yep.
And when does it start becoming like, holy crap, it's Mark Adams? Like, where, how do we get a picture with this guy? Like, where's he going to be? Or, does the set is Maker Camp the second year of Maker Camp? Does that when it start popping off?
I
Or
mean, the second year maker camp gets a little bit. Well,
the second
people
year was
start
like
to
COVID,
know that.
wasn't it?
What's that?
Was the second year COVID with Maker
Yeah,
Camp,
the second year was
or was it?
pre-COVID, I think.
Okay,
Yeah, because I think the third year was the one that was delayed, right?
yeah, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I think even the second year, people were, they, because I remember that, because I was at the milk run, because I,
Of course you
getting
were.
breakfast,
What else
and
would you be doing?
yeah, because because I got there like a day early and they weren't serving breakfast yet, and so I knew that Jimmy had said stop by the milk run and everyone will get breakfast, and um, so I was having breakfast with a bunch of makers and everybody, you know, you're arriving after traveling and you're tired and you're kind of quiet, and so I was sharing where there was probably, I don't know, 10, 15 makers there that everyone is just kind of always dressed in their black Carhartt and um, kind of invaded the milk run a little bit.
Black Carhartts, lots
And,
of flannel, everything you
lots of,
expect,
yeah,
and beards.
everything. Some evenings it was cold. I mean, I actually needed a few more layers because it got cold. Um, but like even then, like because nobody sees my face, so nobody knows really who I am. I'm just and I like being anonymous because it's not really I don't want to be famous at all. Um, but I'd set up my stuff, and I saw the guy that was sitting next to me at the milk run standing by his truck, and I was like, hey, why don't you come over and get your picture taken? And he's gives me this kind of like gruff face and like no, and I'm like, all right, okay, and he had some tools for sale, and then later he shows up with the Modern Forge guys, and it's Chris Cash, as everybody knows Chris Cash. He's always
Hmm.
smiling and gregarious. But that morning he was a little tired. I don't think the caffeine hadn't quite kicked in yet. He wasn't really looking to get a picture. And the Modern Forge guys come over and they get a group shot, but then they start walking away, and it's like hey, you guys come back and get some singles on this. Try and get some some headshots.
Hmm.
And I mean, those guys, how could you take a bad picture of those guys? They've got like the perfect smudge of like coal dust on their face. And, um, they're all black clothes and, black hats and everything. So it really pops from the background. And, Jesse Savage got a great shot that first year. I was, one of my favorites from that year. Chris Cash got like one or two shots in, had this big, huge smile and laugh on his face. And again, one of my top 5 from that year. And people started, from that first thing, started coming in and having more fun with it and just kind of showing up. But I still get people that would come walking in and they'd be like, my friend said I should get a picture. What do I do? And because it's not a normal thing. It's not a normal thing for people to get pictures.
Sure.
Um, and I really, I really understand that because I like to be behind the camera. I don't, I have no desire to get in front of the camera. And so I know it's an uncomfortable thing for people to do, and it's fun. You need to have. I always say this. And I try to say this, because it's true. It's not because it's a line, but it's I'm just having a conversation with you, and I just get to take a couple of pictures because each person, it's the opportunity to get insight into their life that I don't live, that that I'm not from where they're at, or I don't do what they do. And it's just a great opportunity to be able to actually talk to people and learn a little bit more about them.
Well, what struck me, I'm just talking from my own experience. What struck me was I think you overheard me talking about using your picture on one of my dating profiles. And
Right,
I
right, yeah.
sat down on the stool and you're like, "So you're gonna use this on your dating profiles?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." I said, "And my podcast and my website." And you're like, "All right, cool." So and it was like a switch flipped in your head, and
Uh-huh.
you went from like me standing there shot to, no, you know what, let's do more of like a sitting. And you brought the stool over and you set me up like, and it was more, and I love the pictures you got of me. I really did. And
Okay.
it was like you understood. You just, I mean, obviously you're a photographer, you will understand, but it was so cool to just be understood without having to go, yeah, I was looking for something else. Like, no, you knew what I wanted to do with the pictures, and you gave me pictures that work in those contexts. And it was just,
Yeah.
like I said before, it's such a wild feeling for people that have never had this done. And I'm sure there are people who are, on the receiving end of a beautiful shot all the time. I take a lot of photos, but I'm never on the other side of the camera, like rarely, except a selfie, and those are usually trash. Just by their nature, they're trash. But man, it was just such a I'm glad I put it on my bucket list, because normally I would shy away from doing something like that. But the
Uh-huh.
opportunity to have one of these pictures that I've seen everyone have, and I'm like, "Oh, I want to be in one of those." I really want to
Right.
be in one of those.
I mean, it is really like when people come up to the set and they're like, "Oh, I've been seeing your stuff for a couple years," um, and now they're like, "Hey, I want to get my picture," and I'm like, "Well, I hope this works out for you," because before there's no expectation, and so everybody would just get it was a new experience for everybody. There was no preconceived notion about what it would be,
Mhm.
um, and I think some of the expectations have pushed me to do a little bit more. Um, I mean, it's kind of it's in a weird like I had a couple of really great conversations over this maker camp specifically that really kind of clarified the the way that I'm working in this particular context, or how I'm connecting with people, or the kind of my motivations about what I want out of the pictures.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes when you're just doing something, you're not really thinking about it, but then when you have to actually talk about it, it gives you a context to kind of analyze it and put it into words and kind of
Sure.
narrow it down and make it a solid kind of a concept. Um, and so I was having, one of the conversations I was having was, you know, Jimmy's Kitchen is it's like a gathering place. It seems
Mhm.
like every year it's such a great place, and I mean everybody who's Jimmy, you've talked to Jimmy, and everybody who meets Jimmy, I mean, they all have the same response. Like he's just such a generous, kind person, and I think that's can just never be overstated. I'm sure he gets tired of being told how amazing he is, but
He hates literally every second of it. It's
yeah,
the funniest thing. And he is one of those guys, he's just so humble that when you say stuff like that to him, he gets genuinely uncomfortable about it.
yeah.
And it's obvious when you talk to him. It's awesome. It's awesome.
I
But
mean, I really understand that too because I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't really take the compliments as, I mean, I take compliments and criticism in the same
mhm,
measure. Um, both may be valid and both may be completely invalid, but sometimes a compliment is, it's kind of, it's sometimes they're really appreciated when they're coming from the right place or someone really gets you.
mhm,
I had a couple of those during conversations this year that I really felt um, allowed me to kind of take that compliment and see what was behind it and see the reaction to the work that I'm doing, and also make me kind of push me further because then I felt like I could go further than I've been going.
mhm,
Because each year I want to make it a little bit different, whether it's just a little bit lighting difference or whether it's just a level of interaction with the people a little bit differently. And that's what I was really pushing this year. Is I really wanted um, just I really wanted to just really connect with each person that was sitting there. Um,
yeah.
and so in
I
one of the
watched it happen, so I can tell you did a good job. I was literally watching it going, "How does he do that?" Like, I have to, like, I prep for this show, and it's like a conversation, I don't take notes. I have nothing in me. My hands are right here. There's nothing, hands up, hands up. But I don't do that, and I know how hard it is to do that when you're preparing for one person for a chat. Like, you're kind of like, you got to kind of pluck out like the angle that we're going to have a little bit of, just to like an icebreaker, and how we're going to chat with somebody, and keep them at ease and make them relax a little bit, because if you take a tense photo, it's super obvious, maybe not in the moment, but afterwards, and you're reviewing them, you have to do all this over and over and over and over. I'd be freaking out. Not even gonna
Well,
lie.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, one of the things that I always kind of enjoyed, because I'm very much the same as the person who's sitting in front of me.
Hmm.
So I understand how uncomfortable that is,
Hmm.
and there's plenty of times when people would stand in front of it, and I would just be like, "Look, are you socially awkward? Do you have imposter syndrome? What kind? I'm sure you're dealing with some childhood trauma. Look around.
720 people at Maker Camp just raised their hand and went, "Of course I do.
Yeah,
We all do."
yeah, we all do." And just acknowledging that, and people are
Right.
like, "Oh shit! Like, oh, this is going to be real." Because why? I don't want to make small talk about the weather. So, like, there are plenty of people that I had conversations with.
Hmm.
And it's nice when I don't have a line, because I can really spend more time getting to know somebody.
Hmm.
And that's really an amazing thing. And so in Jimmy's Kitchen, I was able to talk to Joan, um, and she's just such an amazing person. And it tends to always go like this kind of a conversation when I'm in Jimmy's Kitchen, and I'm talking to somebody. Inevitably, a couple minutes down the road, Jimmy would be like, "He's the guy that takes the black and white pictures," and then that puts a context on it, because nobody knows my face, and I'm not real. I'm really much more interested in listening to what someone else can tell me about their life.
Hmm.
Um, so it takes probably a little while for people to actually find out what I do. Um, but I had a great conversation with Joan, at Jimmy's Kitchen, and then we got just an amazing picture of her the next day, and I feel like being able to have that time and talk to her was allowed her to be more relaxed, more comfortable. um, and her daughter really loves the picture, and she's ultimately I think she's learning to love it, because we all see a picture of ourselves, and we either immediately love it and we think that it looks exactly like who we think we look like, or it takes us a little bit of time to get used to it. And sometimes,
Oh
if
yeah.
it's a different angle than you're used to seeing, because we only look in the mirror, we're not really doing other stuff. So,
It's
um,
funny? You literally just said what was on my mind when I looked at my pictures, because you took a couple of pictures of me, and then as you were finishing up with me, Jimmy stepped into frame to take a couple of
mhm,
pictures with me. And the picture I liked the best from the whole session was the one of Jimmy and I, like the one that he put on his, and I love that picture. Like, I showed it to my
yeah,
ex-wife, and she's like, "Oh, you absolutely have to put that in a frame." And she goes, "And none of that bullshit buying one. You have to make a frame for that. Like, that has to be on your wall somewhere. It's an amazing picture." And it was such a moment, because the ones you took of me, that the single shots of me, I'm definitely happy with. Don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm most happy of the picture with me and Jimmy, because I think I just look the best in it. Because
Well, it gives you something to do, and you're relaxed. Like, you're
yep,
no longer focused on me taking your picture. So I feel like a lot of people get a great shot in the group.
the group
And
shots are incredible. They're
yeah,
incredible, all of them. That's something that I loved about watching everybody. These what like I'm behind 12 people, and then suddenly I'm next, because all 12 of them are cramming onto your stage to get a picture
yeah,
taken.
right, right. And I
So,
feel like sometimes if you do the group picture first, it allows people to relax, and they can get their portrait done next, and be kind of more relaxed, and kind of that group energy kind of carries over. So sometimes
mhm.
that's real nice.
It's interesting you said you were into portraiture, and, photojournalism was a thing for you, because I feel like your style kind of straddles that interesting newsy look along with portraiture. I think it might just be the black and white thing, but it's not just that it's black and white. It's also the way you pull texture out, and the way you the way your shadows come out. And I know you're not editing every photo on the fly, so I know you're set up that way to get those photos. But there's
Right.
a unique the word texture just keeps coming to mind, so I'm just going to run with it. There's a unique texture to your photos that it doesn't seem like other people capture as well as you do. I've seen it mostly in like people that do like handheld street photography. You know, you always see those gritty pictures of like homeless people where they're really uptight on them, and like
Uh,
every every little hair on their beard is visible, and all the little imperfections in what they're wearing are visible. And you manage to take something like that, which is usually gritty and almost ominous and dark, and you turn it into something where it's just, you know, visually it's as dark, but because the person is, you know, in a better place, they're happy, they want to be there, they're taking a good picture. It's a whole different thing. You've managed to turn like a gritty, almost noir style photo into like a portrait that everyone is just clamoring to get. It's kind of wild how your style managed to straddle all these different things.
I mean, it definitely. Um, once when I took my motorcycle trip and I kind of got I was really burned out, and so I kind of turned my brain to a point where I'd be like, I'm just going to say yes to whatever happens, and I'm not, I'm just going to go with the flow, and so just taking those random pictures in Cleveland, and then Jimmy and Patrick asked me if I wanted to come up there. Um, I just feel like as long as you're available and you can just say yes to whatever might did I know what was going to happen? No, I had no idea what was going to happen. But it really has turned out to that my particular aesthetic has really worked with this group.
Yeah.
And so that's it was really a great kind of synchronicity of what was going on.
Have you always done the shoots the way you're doing them now? Like it's because I thought it was so interesting. Like I didn't know you brought your computer. I didn't know this was your setup. I didn't know you were shooting live to your computer the way you do. And
Right.
it was fascinating just as a geek to watch you operate and see how you were set up to do this. Like the first thing that struck me, and it shouldn't have because it's kind of obvious in hindsight, but the first thing that struck me is you don't use a tripod, which
Right.
is like, oh, wow. Like, you know, portraiture guys love tripods just by their nature. They love tripods, but no tripod, always handheld. You constantly move, which is also interesting. Like you don't have your spot set up so that everything's around me. No, you'll move in, move out, stand over here, stand over there. It's really interesting. There's so many ways where everything I know or I've seen, you're just completely unconventional. Is that just is is that just your style? Like, are you just like I don't know how to. I know what the question is. It's just not coming to me. But I find it interesting the way you operate.
Well, I mean, I think like part of it has to do with the space that I'm working in,
Hmm.
um, because the space that Austin put me in at the Maker thing, it really forced me to be really pared down. So instead of having well, the first year I showed up, I had 12 lights and I had a bunch of packs and I had a bunch of like I could have set up a mini studio in there, because that's what I'd done at the Spring Make. Um, and so this really forced me to go with, one light, one background, and you saw the background blowing around because
Yeah.
I can't anchor that background or it becomes a wall that's going to blow over because I can't put enough weight on it. So it just, you just let the paper blow up and then it settles down when the wind stops. And then so it gives you those moments where, it gives me a little bit of a break. It gives me an opportunity to like hang out and just talk with somebody for a little bit, while the wind's kind of settling down. But I don't want to be tied to one place because the light, like I get the lights set up because I know that anything in front of me is going to look it's going to have light on it. I don't
Hmm.
know how the light's going to work with that person because I don't have my models on. So I'm actually can't see any light that I'm going to be shooting by as I'm shooting, which is really not how I would normally do it.
Hmm.
Um, because if I was shooting in an advertisement or model or something like that, I'd want to see kind of get it all crafted. But in this case, not having a tripod allows me to get a nice tight shot, do a wide shot. If I've got a group, I don't have to move a bunch of stuff. It doesn't slow me down. Um, but in another one of the conversations I was having, I was talking to a guy who was saying that he doesn't see visual images in his head, and so he can see, read a word, but he can't. He doesn't. His brain doesn't have a picture of that um, item. So, like if it said giraffe, he would know what giraffe is, but he wouldn't be able to picture it mentally.
Wow.
And so, in having that conversation, I was kind of saying that like if I'm working in another material other than photography, I'm like working in clay or something like that. I don't have a visual picture in my head that I'm looking at. I feel it's more my hands. Like my hands know when it feels like what I want it to feel like,
Oh,
and
wow.
so it's not in that way. It's not a visual picture either. But when I'm doing the portraiture, I know that I've got light going forward. I don't know how it's going to hit the subject, but I'm really just paying attention to the emotion of the person, hopefully, so that if they're having a relaxed moment or a genuine smile or a genuine laugh, then that's when I'm taking the picture and not when it looks good. Because I don't know what the light's going to do, but I know that there's going to be an emotion there,
The
and so
greatest
that's the only reason I think my work is turning out the way it is because that's really what I'm focused on.
There's emotion in every photo, like, and what's interesting is that I remember how I felt with every one of the photos you sent me, like, the one that I did, the close up of me sitting there, I remember how I felt like I'm gonna look so good in this, it's gonna look good on my profiles, and then the one with Jimmy and I, and Jimmy almost made me cry, like, 3 seconds before you took the photo, and
Yeah,
then the one where we got photobombed, which was I was so glad that that actually made it to the email because we were doing the photo and that I don't know that guy's name. He was just cracking everybody up and he just photobombed our photo. And I took that and I looked at the photo and I instantly had the same reaction seeing him in the photo as I did when I heard him
yeah.
behind us. You know, it was just
Uh,
every single emotion was instantly back. It was like having an emotional tape recorder with those
yeah.
photos. It was crazy. You do manage to capture that moment really really well because you can visually. It's a visual cue that just instantly triggers the emotion that you had at the moment.
Right. I mean,
I
that's. I'm thankful that people have that experience.
I everyone had that experience. I mean, we when I've told a couple of people that I was chatting with you tonight, and like, oh, that's going to be a great conversation. He's such a great guy. You know, we all your photos, as much as we joke about them being everywhere, really are a signature of Maker Camp as much as anything else that goes on at Maker Camp now. Like you're a
Yeah,
fixture there. You
yeah,
know, if I didn't know what you look like, which I didn't, that's how
right.
but I found you because it's like, oh, the guy with the pictures, there he
Yeah,
is, and it's like, oh, that's Mark. All right, cool. Now I know what Mark looks like.
right,
So,
right. So
but
now, because now you had mentioned earlier when we were chatting a little bit, you like what was your impression of Maker Camp before you went, and then how was it? How did it change your expectations of? How was it different from your expectations?
so it's interesting because I didn't want to go. I legitimately did not want to go. And because I was just like, I'm just gonna drive all the way up there for what? What am I gonna drive up there for? But then you start to get the little bit of peer pressure. And I've given Keith Drennan a lot of crap from the Working Hands podcast, not in a
Huh?
bad way. I
Yeah,
legitimately mean that he put peer pressure on me. He wasn't like begging me to come, but it was just like, dude, you just need to come. You're going to enjoy it. Just shut up and come. Shut. Finally, I was just like, fine, I'm going to come. I'll be there. And you start to find out that a lot of your friends that you didn't realize were going to be there are going to be there. So
yeah,
I kind of just like, screw it. I'll just go. It's one day. Worst case scenario is I'll bump into some people I've not met in person and see some old friends at the same time. That was the worst case scenario. I was like, that's worth a day.
right.
Well, I got there and I had a couple of moments where I think I've talked about it on here. I may have talked about it with Jimmy, um, where I'm not a famous person, right? And I always see the guys like Jimmy and Bob Claggett and David Picciuto, like those types, and they always talk about how weird it is when you're at an event and somebody comes up to you and introduces themselves because they know you but you don't know them. And I
Yeah,
always
right.
thought like that'd be a wild experience to have, like to have someone come up to me and just go, "Hey, I'm a fan of your work, or I'm a fan of your podcast," and whatever. I was like, that'd be really cool, and it happened to me. while I was there, and it was just like, oh my god, this is why you had to come here. So you could have that moment.
Right.
You can have that moment. And what ended up happening was I didn't take any of the classes. I didn't take advantage of any of the educational stuff that was going on. But what I did get to do, I just spent the whole time connecting with people.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm not a comfortable person with other people. I'm terrible with other people. I'm just an overcompensating introvert. So like when I get around a bunch of people, I can chat with anyone. I really
Right.
can. I It's one of the reasons I can do this show is because I can chat with anyone. But I am really uncomfortable in those situations. But what it did do is it just dragged me kicking and screaming out of my shell and out of my living room to an extent.
Hmm.
And at the end of the evening, I was just overwhelmed with how happy I was that I went. And I actually, right toward the end of the evening, right before I left, I told Keith, I was like, "Man, I owe you a big one for you know pressuring me to come
Right.
because it was amazing. Like next year, I'm going to be there all 3 days. There's no
Well,
doubt in
because
my
I mean,
mind."
if you go one day, you're like, oh, I wish I could stay, and then it's like, it really is such the
Yeah,
energy is amazing this year.
I had to be there. I had to do the small taste this
Mhm.
year. I don't think I could have handled all 3 days this year because the emotions
Okay.
were just all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
But knowing what to expect for next time,
Hmm.
no brainer. All three
Right.
days, I'm going to
Right.
be there. I will get a room wherever I have to. But it's a wild event, and I really feel bad for anyone that thinks that that they don't need to go. I mean, if you can't go, you can't go. There's reasons people can't make it. I
Yeah.
understand, but
Sure.
if you're as dumb as I was and think you don't need to go, you're wrong. That's the bottom line. You're just wrong. Just go.
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean,
I'm
I think aside from all the great sponsors that they've got,
hmm
uh, and because I mean, they really do have some of the great sponsors. They've got
sure.
Brunt. Then the Brunt guys were hysterical on set. I loved, busting their balls. That was so fun. Um, and they sent me a couple of hats. It was very generous of them. And then you've got Lincoln Electric, you've got Isotunes, you've got uh,
Sabretooth,
Sabretooth, you've got Avid, the
um,
CNC guys. They
Libra.
cut me a sign that says "Stand on Me," so they cut me this metal plaque that I can put on the ground now, so people know where to stand.
That's
And
great.
that was super awesome. Um, and you've just got Broadbeck, like I was able to buy that knife from him,
hmm
and so they've got their tent there where they've got I think Mareko was doing demos on knife making, and
Yep.
then they were working and I mean, even if you're not doing all that, which unfortunately I can't get away from my set because
Sure.
uh, I want everybody who stops by Maker Camp to be able to have the chance to get a picture. So that's why I'm usually there as long as I am. But like just the everybody is there, and it's such great energy that even if you're not doing an active demo, you're at
Yeah.
least hanging around with people that share the same passions you have. Have the same you know like you said, you're an introvert. Maybe you're compensating. Like most people who are makers are working alone in their garage or their
Yep.
their basement, or and so it really is it's like spring break for makers in some ways, for people just to be around the people that they are comfortable with.
I feel like that's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is because a lot of times, over the last couple of years, I've had get a lot of guests.
Hmm.
I people that know this show know how much I love when somebody's never been on another podcast and this is their first one and they get to have that first chat. And I get to have that first chat with them because I get to pull their story out of them a little bit and
Right.
talk about their origin story and what they love doing and why they love doing it. And it's so much fun for me to get that out of people who normally, I guess in kind of a way I do with people on this show, at least some of them, what you do with people when they step in front of your camera.
Right.
You pull the emotion out of them and say, "Hey, you're the star for a few minutes." Well, I do the same thing.
Hmm.
I get someone to be a star for 90 minutes, even if it's a small star. You're the most important thing in my life for those 90 minutes, and
Yeah.
I'm going to make you feel important. And then afterwards, I'm going to make you feel important, and hopefully the listeners will jump on board and make you feel important also. And you're going to make a whole bunch of new friends because you took the leap and gave me a chance to be on my show. So It's wild. Like, I guess maybe, I didn't even think of it that way until I was just saying that, but I guess maybe I kind of understand how you operate because I just do something else, but I kind of do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I think people, they want to be understood, and they want to be, in my case, they want to be seen.
Mhm.
And that's, it's really important for me when someone takes a look at their picture and they're, um, moved by what they see, what I'm able to capture of them
Yeah.
seems familiar to them, and it doesn't seem, false to them, which is the other reason why I work the way I do, where I don't really, if I'm asking you to do something, I'm not asking you to pose. I just want you to start in
You've
one
never
place.
asked me to pose. That's 100% the case. Yes. You
And
never said
so,
pose. You're just like, "Come over here, look at the camera." And it's funny how that alone makes you more relaxed because it's like I don't have to, it's not a formula for how I have to position myself to look
right.
good in your photos. You're like, "Nope, just come over here, sit down, look here, because I want you to look." And you even explain, "I want you to look over here because I don't want the glare in your glasses." Like, okay, cool. Turn my head a little bit. Perfect. Don't move. Good. And then it's like, okay, you like that? Yeah. Okay, good. Let's take three more. Let's make sure that we
Yeah.
captured the right moment. It's like, wow, it's just so nice working with you. it's I can
Well, I
I
mean, I think I view it, I really view it as a collaboration, and
sure.
I think that's, something I want people to understand, that it's like, and I tell people, I'm like, we're a team. We're not. I'm not letting you get off the set until you're happy with what picture you get. So, because if they're not there, I don't have anything to take a picture of. If I'm not there, there's nobody to take a picture. So it really is teamwork when
I,
they're on my set.
I felt so funny saying that you were a bucket list a thing for me at Maker Camp. Like one of the things that got me to Maker Camp, like it was seeing my friends, it was
Right.
getting 3D scanned by Dave, and it was getting photographed by you. Like those were the three reasons I came. And as I was standing there, I'm like, I don't believe it. I actually wanted to do this, and I'm doing this. And then it was done. I was like, and it's awesome. Like this was totally, totally everything I'd hoped it was going to be. So
Well, I mean, it definitely, when you said it was like a bucket list thing, I was kind of, I mean, it is kind of weird now that people have it as, something to do. Um, Whereas before it was like an unexpected thing that happened, like, and not everyone's going to be like Craig and bring a bus full of wardrobe changes. But, and I really tried to encourage that this year, because I think, like, if I'm there, I want the opportunity to take as many different pictures as somebody wants, because I'm not going to use all of them, but it gives me the
sure.
opportunity to do different things with them and have different looks, and um, so that when I start posting them on my feed, I've got some variety that people can keep looking at different things, and it's not all the same pose, because I really don't want people to end up having the same experience. I want them to have their own experience. So
I think you managed to capture things in a way that is exactly along those lines. It's an experience. I think that's something I'm looking forward to now already for next year is like the updated Mark Adams picture at Maker Camp next year.
I mean, I
So
think if you're a maker who's doing a demonstration there, I set up on that Monday.
mhm.
And sometimes and people don't really know that. So if you're doing a demo, like if you can't get away during Maker Camp, I want the people that are doing those things to also have that opportunity to get their picture taken too. So I do try to get there a day early and try and get people if they're set when they're setting up, and then also the day after everyone's breaking down. So that way, everybody who's doing the presentations and part of putting the camp together can get their portrait on the same time. So
I think I speak for a lot of people when I say, your contributions to us as a community, and you're pretty much part of the community now by default.
right.
But I feel like your contributions to our community are just massive and tremendously appreciated because your work is incredible, and being able to have that moment with you is just, it's a priceless experience. I mean, I get a little emotional thinking about it, but if it's truth, I'm telling the God's honest truth here. It's the one thing that, like, I don't care what I'm doing at Maker Camp, I'm going to be on that line waiting to have that experience again because it was just so good. And then this time, you'll actually know who I am, which is also awesome. And I'll come to you on the first line.
Right, right. Yeah, if you get there early on like Thursday, then definitely stop by and you can get some more relaxed portraits as opposed to and I mean I think this like some years it's a little warmer in the evenings, and but this year it got really chilly. There were a couple of nights where
Yeah.
I was stopping at 6 or 7, and usually I would try to shoot to like 11 or 12. I think the latest night I shot here, I think was uh, Sunday. I think I shot till 1.
Yeah.
Um,
I left at like 9:15. You still had a line. It's like there's still people just like lining up for this poor guy. He doesn't get to breathe.
well, because I was telling Chris Chast actually just told the anecdote. He'd finished with something, and he was walking by my set, and I was just finished the last people, and there were a bunch of people still hanging out over by the fire, and he's he's like, "Oh, you're done for the night?" And I'm like, "Because you guys are fucking quitters. I'm here. You guys quitters."
I
So,
love it.
um,
I love it.
I really think it's fun for me to to kind of take that mentality that I'm never gonna be the last person. I'm not gonna stop. I'm just gonna keep going, and it gives me the motivation to kind of keep that energy going throughout the whole event.
Oh, it's greatly appreciated, and the fact that you do what you do just out of love of doing it and out of love of giving back to a community that it's magnificent and it's greatly appreciated. So I'm really glad I had the chance to talk to you about it. Why don't we move on to things of the week, because your thing of the week is actually tangentially related to Maker Camp, which is kind of crazy. You
Yeah,
have something you sent me a picture of,
yeah.
and I'm still I'm looking at the picture as I'm talking about it, and I'm still stunned by it. It's absolutely gorgeous. So why don't you tell us about your thing of the week? And for those of you that are watching the video version, and that's why you should watch the video version,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Which,
actually
which
put the
I'd probably hope to light myself a little bit better, but it got dark here so early. I was like, the light was nice when we started, but then
yeah. It's
now
all
it's
good. We'll figure it out. But I'll have the pictures of what he's talking about as he introduces it and talks about it. So why don't you tell us the story of your thing of the week this week?
So I was walking around Maker Camp, just taking a minute to take a break, and walked over to the Broadbeck tent, and Ryan was standing there, and he had this knife that he was had in his hand, and it's got the handle is, I mean, something. If you haven't seen it and don't know what it is, you got to check it out online. And there's two kinds, I think. There's either Jeepite or Fordite, and they're similar materials
Yeah,
where they come from like the paint booths
the
of those
overspray.
factories,
Hmm.
and so then they can make it so it's this layered and multi different colors of layers, and each one's unique because the way they sprayed that day. And so he's got the handle, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, oh, that thing is really a beautiful knife, and so I didn't really think about it until then I got a picture of he came on set, and I was like, oh, let me get a picture of the knife, and so I took a picture of the knife and posted that. And so I said that it's really beautiful, and if you ever decide to sell it, let me know.
Hmm.
And he's like, I thank you, yeah, it's not for sale. And then a couple days later, he's like, so if it was for sale,
Ooh, all right.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, so he sold it to me, and I'm blessed to have it. It's a beautiful knife. It's on if you check Night Owl Forge, if you check his page, he's got a video, or I think he was finished it and was taking it to Blade Show, I think. Um, and so yeah, so that'll be a treasured knife in the collection. That's the first Maker thing I've purchased. So he's also has
Nice.
that. So um,
It's got
yeah,
the two materials that are the most insane. Like it's got Fordite, which I've always thought is one of the coolest things ever. But it's
yeah,
also the blade is 1084 and meteorite. So it's not even just steel, it's part meteorite. Like it's the coolest knife ever. And
yeah.
it's really, really cool. It's a beautiful piece. Yeah, I'll have the link to there's a reel that shows a couple shots of it, and then of course Mark took a really cool photo of it. So I'll have some stuff in the show notes that you guys can take a look at, because this is definitely worth checking out. My thing of the week this week is, so for those of you that have been following along, you know that I've been working on upgrading my YouTubing setup so that my videos look and sound a whole lot better. And I've gotten everything sorted out. And one of the ways I got it sorted out was getting a better lav system. So I had the Rode, don't even remember what it's called. It's not even worth talking about. It's the little square one that everyone talks about and everybody seems to love. And honestly, I was never that happy with it. I just feel like the pickup on it, even though it's as small as like what you would find in a professional lab, it just wasn't as good. I didn't think the audio quality was as good. So I started looking for other things, and then DJI came out with the DJI mic, which I have in my hand. And this is wild. This thing is, it's two receivers, it's one receiver and two transmitters. It'll broadcast in stereo from one or split mono from two. And what's crazy about this, the case charges the whole thing. They run for 15 hours. The whole setup runs for 15 hours. You'll never use 15 hours. I mean, if you're talking for 15 hours, you've got other problems than what lab you're using. But the one thing that this does that makes it worth every single cent is that it has what's called a safety track. So as you're talking, you can hit the record button on your lav and it will record a -6 decibel version of the same audio that you're sending to the receiver. And what is that for? Well, if you're anything like me, you'll talk into that thing, you'll record your whole video, you'll sit down at Premiere to edit it, and the first thing you're going to realize is you are clipping like crazy because you talk too loud with the lav too close. Well, guess what? This gives you a second recording. Now, would you want to use it all the time? Probably not. But you at least have it in case something goes catastrophically wrong. It's recording at a lower level than the main audio on the mic. It's a fantastic setup. I think I paid $329 for it, but the first video I did with it, with the quality leap was just, it's massive. It's a fantastic piece of equipment. I've recommended it to other people and I just didn't have it for myself. So now I finally got around to getting it for myself. I would highly recommend it if you want to up your game. And what's nice about the two labs is if you're two people on camera, one person gets one person gets the other. They get recorded on separate tracks. You just split them apart and you can work with two separate recordings in your video app of choice.
So are you going to be doing walk around video interviews at the next Maker Camp?
I wanted to do it this year, but I just
Yeah,
I wasn't going to be there long enough, but next year I'm absolutely going to be doing that. I'm
yeah.
100% that's the plan to, spend a few minutes talking to everybody and do that. It's going to
And you
be
think that that lab will work for you? Like that'll be a good.
Oh, 100%. I have
Yeah.
no doubt in my mind. The nice thing is if I can grab someone to just run camera, and by run camera, I mean hold it, stop it, and start it. But
Right.
even if I just use a tripod, but if I just throw one of them on them, one of them on me, and we can just go, I think
Hmm.
it'll work great. Because I feel like I missed an opportunity this year to do some content with Maker Camp.
Right.
But
Right.
now that I know what to expect, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable doing stuff like that
For
in
sure.
the
Yeah.
coming year. So 100% recommend the DJI mic. If you've seen my YouTube channel, you've already seen the difference in the quality of video. So you can go check that out, which is where you're watching this show if you're watching it, most likely. Next thing I'd like to do is thank all the people that support this show financially because this show can't be done if it doesn't make money. I say that with a smile on my face, not begging. I do appreciate so much all the financial support this show gets. The support comes from Matthew Serio from Artigiano Serio, Al Schultz from New York Woodworks, Tori Decker from Tori Did It, Ed Swanson of Ed's Clocks and More, Jake Drews from Make with Jake, Megan Chris of Onyx Designs Woodwork, Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy, Kim and Garrett from Kim and Garrett Make It, Rory Langefeld of RLL Woodworks and DIY, Robert J. Keller, Rebecca Cole from Bexy Designs, Brian Arsenault of Seven Hills Maker, Lars Coleman of Colorado Multicraft, Dave Bauer of Dave Bauer Art, and Jeremy Spees. If you can't support the show financially, I appreciate any support you can give, which can include everything from sharing the show to writing a review. If you do support the show financially, thank you so much. You get the video version at least a day earlier, or in the case of the past couple of weeks, you may get it 2 or 3 days earlier, whenever it's done. And there's going to be other perks for you guys, so you might want to get in on that action as well. But either way, I appreciate whatever you do to help spread this show, and I can't do it without you. So thank you so much for all of that. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
You as well. Thank you for having me.
I was a bit starstruck, and I got over it, and I was like, I got to get Mark on, and that's it,
Yeah.
because it's like if I'm going to talk to people that include the digital world, the technology world, the maker world, like I can't think of a better person to have on. And again, thank you so much for what you do for the community. Thank you so much for giving so much of your time back to just taking pictures of us. Some of us are not terribly attractive, And it really is appreciated that you look through a camera lens at us, because even the unattractive ones end up looking good when you take a picture of them. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Where can people find you? I mean, I know you have Instagram. Is there anywhere else? You have Mark Adams Pictures on Instagram. Is there any place else that you want to send people so that they can find you?
I mean, that seems to be where most people will find me. I mean,
Okay.
I've also been encouraging makers to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because everybody, they make in their garage, but they also, have other careers that they're doing other stuff in, and
Sure.
so it's kind of nice to give I'm tired of seeing like all the content about, whatever this computer company is, or whatever this HR department. I'm like, okay, that's great, but like if you're making and it's part of your personality, then I'd like to see a little more of those posts. I think so.
Okay.
I'm enjoying some of those. And I try to post the maker portraits on there as well, because obviously it's a professional setting. So that's cool. What I do. And then I think that's really the two main places that I've been kind of putting stuff out.
Okay. And of course, obviously, as long as he's still standing, you can find him at Maker Camp in the pavilion. Just find the longest line, and at the front of it's going to be Mark doing his thing. So thanks again. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. And I look forward to getting my picture taken next year. Thank you so much to everyone who listened. I really appreciate you guys. I can't do the show without you. And hopefully I never have to. But in the meantime, I'll be back next week with another guest, and I look forward to talking to you then. Have a good week, everybody.